Right, so this is essentially a guide to hiring developers as a small company. And I say this as somebody who runs a software company, and it's pretty small. I'm right now a team of 5 people in total. Not everybody is a developer, but I've been doing this for the past 3 years, and I've made a lot of mistakes hiring. And if you're a developer and you're curious about how to get hired, I think it's also a very interesting video to watch, and kind of get an insider perspective on what employers look for, especially if you want to look at startups and things like that. Um, the the number one thing comes down to standards. Like, the first and most important thing is standards. Basically, you want to look for people who have the ability to discern between good and bad quality things. They do not necessarily need the technical skills, but at the start, I hired really poorly because I didn't know how to vet people, and I made some very poor hires. And so what ended up happening was I had to fix the work myself after them trying to do it, and it was delayed as well. And so it was just overall a mess. The thing that I didn't realize I didn't know how to hire for was basically somebody who could tell apart what's the difference between good and bad. And the problem is, if you have to walk through and review something 6 different times, but the first 3 you were pointing out, this button doesn't work, this thing doesn't, I told you it's meant to be like this. Like, you shouldn't need to point those things out. That's what I call high quality standards. And a lot of people don't have those. They just do the bare minimum. And that is the number one thing. And okay, how do I vet and hire for that? I think the number one thing is portfolio. The way people treat their portfolio will tell you how they're going to treat their projects and things. When you open up a portfolio, do they pay attention to the details? Are the small things, in order? If that's not the case, the chances are they probably don't pay that much attention in their real work either. The other thing is, I think you can actually present them with 2 things that are very similar, but one is slightly lower quality, and you can ask them to discern, why is this one better than this? And it's a really interesting exercise. Not one that I've done too often, but I think it's a very interesting one, and something that I'd like to do more. The other thing is, when hiring, especially as a small company, I really think going through referrals is the better way to go. Like, especially because you are small, you are more agile, and so you don't need to hire 20 developers at once, most likely. And so you can afford to go through your network, go through referrals, post about it on social media, and get people organically and interview all of them yourself. I think it's really paramount that you interview and have a sense of who you're bringing on. That has been my approach, and it's worked very well. And I think, like, the 2 things that I hire for, is the standards thing. So that's number 1. But then number 2 immediately after is culture. And so technical skills are actually not on that list, because if somebody has high standards and they have good culture, the technical skills can come after. I can teach somebody how to code. I cannot teach somebody what good looks like. It's very hard, because if people don't want to learn what good looks like, they won't. And that is a very, very challenging fix. And the culture bit is basically because if you find somebody who's good, but they're culturally not a fit, there's a risk of them slowing down your company. Because, like, when you have somebody who's I think Gymshark, they call it like culture fuckers or something. But basically, people who mess up the company culture, they drag everybody else down. So that exists as a risk. Even if they don't do that, they will not stay long term if you don't have a culture that can retain. Especially if you're a small business, it's going to be very hard for you to compete with insane salaries from somewhere else. Though there's a lot of job hoppers, and I have managed to retain. Like, my first employee has been with me for over a year, and like, my first full-time hire, and he's really good. And I think a lot of it has come down to culture and the way that I've treated everybody, and the way that I've created a team culture where people enjoy working with one another. At the end of the day, you will spend most of your working life with colleagues and peers. And so if you want somebody to stick around for a long time, you need to give them a reason to. And that reason usually isn't money, because at some point, money, is enough. Like, if you pay a decent enough salary, like, there's decent enough salaries elsewhere. What keeps people in the long run is always going to be other people. And so you have to work on that as well. And you have to find people who can fit into the group that you already have if you have a small company. I think those two things go such a long way. So, like, if you're hiring for technical positions, don't don't get too deep into the technical skills and all of that. You need to do a technical interview to make sure like they have some skills, but the standards they show and the culture is way more paramount. I think that goes such a long way. But yeah, that's my kind of 2 cents on hiring. And you know, you can't always win. Sometimes it's very hard to compete with other positions and other opportunities because you are small and you might not have the resources. Like, I've bootstrapped my business, I have no investors, and so I've built everything from the ground up. As a result of that, I survive on cash flow, which means, you know, sure, I can't pay somebody 400 grand a year to develop for me, like, no chance. And there are companies who can do that. And so the way you have to compete with that will come down to the little things, the culture things like that. And that goes a very long way, like how you treat people. And then, you know, if somebody has good standards and you treat them well, they'll stay. If you hire for poor standards, you will lose your mind. This happened to me, my second hire. I had to fire him in 2 months because he basically just didn't get what high quality was. And I'd have to keep reviewing things. And every review cycle takes time. And so you want to find somebody who needs fewer review cycles to do the same thing, the same outcome. Ideally, they shouldn't need, you know, like their review should be minimal. But if you have somebody who, you know, doesn't connect the button, doesn't, you know, do those things, the simple things, the things that I think are obvious and they don't think is obvious, that's a problem. The person with the highest standards should always be running the business. And so you need somebody to be at least somewhat close to you, because otherwise you have to keep dragging them up by their feet. And either you're going to waste your time constantly reviewing things or micromanaging, or nothing's going to get done. And that's a problem. Like, either the progress is really slow or you have to constantly micromanage, which is a waste of your time. Micromanaging is literally you using half of your time to manage somebody else doing their full-time work. That's a person and a half worth of hours to do one person's output. It's a complete waste of hours, complete waste of manpower. And it's something that I think I've struggled with in the past, which is why I pointed out. But yeah, that is hopefully some interesting reflections and points and things to point out. But if you have other things that you might be curious about how I do in my company, do comment, because I do read those and take some video ideas from those. But it's, yeah, hiring, like, developers will make or break your business. And so figuring out how to get the right ones when you're very small is a huge thing. And I wish I knew some of this stuff earlier. Like, I really did. I made such big mistakes. So yeah, hopefully it helps out.